Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we're pulling back the curtain on a story that might sound like a feel-good education headline, but underneath, there's a geopolitical chess match playing out in lecture halls and dormitories across Hong Kong.
I'm Maya Clarity, and Alex, when I first saw this story, I thought, okay, more students going to Hong Kong, that's nice. But then I started digging into the numbers, the policy changes, and the money flows, and what emerged is a story about how education is being weaponized as soft power infrastructure. This is not just about students choosing a university. This is about nations positioning themselves for the next 50 years.
That's exactly right. So here's the headline, straight from the South China Morning Post. Hong Kong's universities are seeing a surge in popularity, not just from mainland Chinese students, which has been the trend for years, but now increasingly from Southeast Asian nations and countries participating in China's Belt and Road Initiative. And this shift didn't happen by accident.
No, it did not. Hong Kong's Secretary for Education, Christine Choi Yuk-lin, was speaking at a reception for something called Study in Hong Kong Week, which ran through the end of last week. And what she laid out was essentially a recruitment pitch to the world. She said, and I'm quoting from the South China Morning Post's reporting, that Hong Kong is now attracting more students from outside of mainland China, particularly from Asean nations and Belt and Road countries.
Now, let's pause there for a moment. For our viewers who may not be familiar, ASEAN is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. That's 10 countries, including Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, and others. Combined population of roughly 700 million people. And the Belt and Road Initiative, launched by President Xi Jinping back in 2013, is China's massive global infrastructure and investment program spanning over 150 countries. We're talking trillions of dollars in roads, ports, railways, and now, apparently, university pipelines.
And that's the key word, Alex. Pipelines. Because when you send your brightest young people to study in another country, you're not just getting an education. You're building networks. You're building loyalty. You're building a generation of professionals and future leaders who have personal ties, professional connections, and cultural fluency with the host nation. This is Soft Power 101, and Beijing has been studying this playbook for decades, watching how the United States and the United Kingdom built global influence through institutions like Harvard, Oxford, MIT, and Cambridge.
Absolutely. And here's what makes Hong Kong such a strategic piece of this puzzle. Hong Kong occupies a unique position. It operates under the one country, two systems framework, at least nominally. Its universities are globally ranked. Several of them, the University of Hong Kong, the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Chinese University of Hong Kong, consistently appear in the top 100 of world university rankings. They teach in English. They have internationally recognized degree programs. And they sit at the geographic and cultural crossroads between mainland China and the rest of Asia.
So if you're a student from Vietnam or Indonesia or Thailand, and you want a world-class education with strong ties to the Chinese economy, which is increasingly dominant in your region, Hong Kong is the perfect destination. You get the prestige, you get the language skills, you get the network, and you get proximity to the world's second-largest economy. It's an incredibly attractive package, and the Hong Kong government knows this.
Now, let's talk about what's driving this on the policy side, because this isn't just organic market demand. The Hong Kong government has been actively engineering this shift. They've been loosening visa restrictions for international students. They've been expanding scholarship programs. They've been investing in housing and campus infrastructure specifically designed to accommodate a growing international student body. And critically, they've been aligning their education strategy with Beijing's broader Belt and Road objectives.
And here's where the money trail gets interesting. According to reporting from the South China Morning Post, Hong Kong has been positioning itself as a regional education hub, and that positioning comes with significant government backing. We're talking about dedicated funding streams, marketing campaigns targeting Belt and Road nations, and institutional partnerships being forged between Hong Kong universities and universities across Southeast Asia and beyond. This is a coordinated, state-backed strategy.
Let me put some numbers on this to give our viewers a sense of scale. Mainland Chinese students have long been the dominant international cohort in Hong Kong's universities, sometimes making up 80 to 90% of non-local students. But what Minister Choi's comments signal is a deliberate diversification strategy. They want to reduce that concentration and bring in students from a wider range of countries, particularly those in the Belt and Road orbit.
And the question we have to ask is, who benefits from this arrangement? On the surface, everyone wins, right? Students get access to excellent education. Hong Kong universities get tuition revenue and global prestige. Hong Kong's economy gets an influx of young, educated talent. But look deeper, and the beneficiaries become more specific and more strategic.
First, Beijing benefits enormously. Every student from a Belt and Road country who studies in Hong Kong becomes a potential node in China's global influence network. When those students graduate and return home, or stay and build careers in Hong Kong or mainland China, they carry with them relationships, cultural understanding, and often, a favorable view of the system that educated them. This is exactly how the United States built its post-World War II global influence, through programs like the Fulbright Scholarships, through the GI Bill opening up American universities, through decades of welcoming international students who then became leaders in their home countries.
And let's be clear about something. There is nothing inherently wrong with countries investing in education and using it as a soft power tool. The United States does it. The United Kingdom does it. Australia does it. France does it. What makes this story newsworthy is the scale, the strategic alignment with Belt and Road, and the specific geopolitical context in which it's happening. Because this isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening while China is expanding its military presence in the South China Sea, while it's building ports and railways across Southeast Asia, while it's signing trade deals and security pacts with Asean nations. The education pipeline is one piece of a much larger strategic architecture.
And there's another angle here that deserves scrutiny, and that's the impact on academic freedom. Since the implementation of the national security law in Hong Kong in 2020, there have been well-documented concerns about the shrinking space for free expression on Hong Kong campuses. Student unions have been disbanded. Professors have been cautioned about what they can and cannot say. Research topics related to sensitive political issues have become fraught with risk. So when we talk about Hong Kong attracting more international students, we also have to ask, what kind of academic environment are those students entering?
That's a critical point, Alex. Because the brand that Hong Kong is selling to these international students is built on the reputation that its universities established during an era of greater academic freedom. The question is whether that reputation can survive the current political environment. And for students coming from countries where academic freedom may already be limited, this might not be a deal-breaker. But it should be part of the conversation.
Now, let's look at this from the perspective of the ASEAN countries themselves. For nations like Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, sending students to Hong Kong is a double-edged sword. On one hand, their citizens gain access to excellent education and career opportunities. On the other hand, it deepens their integration into China's sphere of influence at a time when many of these countries are trying to maintain a delicate balance between Beijing and Washington.
And that balance is getting harder to maintain every year. Look at the Philippines, which has ongoing territorial disputes with China in the South China Sea. Look at Vietnam, which has a complex historical relationship with China that includes border conflicts. These countries are trying to benefit from China's economic rise while protecting their sovereignty and maintaining their own strategic flexibility. Educational ties are one more thread in that web of interdependence.
There's also a domestic dimension to this story that's worth exploring. In Hong Kong itself, there has been growing public debate about the impact of large numbers of mainland Chinese students on local culture, housing, and the job market. Adding students from other countries into the mix could either ease some of those tensions by diversifying the student population, or it could intensify them by increasing overall competition for limited resources.
And we should note that Hong Kong's own young people have been leaving in significant numbers since 2020, part of a broader emigration wave driven by political changes. So there's a demographic reality here too. Hong Kong needs people. It needs talent. It needs young workers to sustain its economy. International students are one solution to that problem, and the government is quite transparent about this. Minister Choi's comments at the Study in Hong Kong Week event were as much about workforce development as they were about education.
Let's also talk about the competitive landscape, because Hong Kong is not the only player in this game. Singapore has been aggressively positioning itself as an education hub. Japan and South Korea are expanding their English language programs to attract international students. Australia and the United Kingdom, traditional destinations for Asian students, are grappling with visa restrictions and political backlash against immigration. So Hong Kong is making its move at a moment when the global education market is in flux, and that timing is not coincidental.
No, it's calculated. And it's worth noting that Singapore, Hong Kong's primary rival in this space, operates under a very different political system. Singapore has its own constraints on academic freedom, to be sure, but it doesn't have the same cloud of the national security law hanging over it. So Hong Kong is competing not just on educational quality and cost, but on perception and trust, and those are currencies that can be hard to rebuild once they're spent.
Now, I want to pull the lens back even further, because this story connects to something we've been tracking on this show for a long time, and that's the global competition for talent and influence. We are living in an era where the most valuable resource is not oil, it's not minerals, it's not even technology. It's people. Specifically, it's educated, skilled, connected people. And the nations that win the competition for those people will shape the 21st century.
And what we're seeing in Hong Kong is one front in that competition. China, through Hong Kong, is saying to the developing world, come study with us. We'll give you a world-class education. We'll connect you to the fastest-growing economy on the planet. And in return, we get a generation of leaders who understand us, who have personal ties to us, who see us as partners rather than adversaries.
It's a compelling offer, and it's backed by real resources and real institutional quality. But it also comes with strings, whether those strings are visible or not. And that's what makes this story so important. Because the decisions being made today in university admissions offices and government ministries will echo for decades. The students enrolling in Hong Kong's universities right now are the trade ministers, the CEOs, the diplomats, and the policymakers of 2040 and 2050.
And that brings us to the deeper pattern we see again and again on this show. The most consequential power moves of our time don't look like power moves. They look like scholarships. They look like infrastructure projects. They look like trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They're wrapped in the language of cooperation and mutual benefit, and often they do deliver real benefits. But they also reshape the global order in ways that most people don't notice until it's too late to change course.
So what should our viewers take away from this? First, pay attention to education policy. It's not boring. It's not a backwater issue. It is a leading indicator of geopolitical strategy. When a government invests heavily in attracting foreign students, they're telling you something about their long-term ambitions. And right now, Hong Kong and Beijing are telling us that they want to be the educators of the next generation of Asian and developing world leaders.
Second, follow the money and the policy changes. When visa restrictions are loosened, when scholarships are expanded, when housing is built specifically for international students, those aren't random administrative decisions. They're strategic investments. And they deserve the same scrutiny we give to military budgets and trade deals, because in the long run, they may matter just as much or more.
Third, consider the perspective of the students themselves. For a young person in Vietnam or Indonesia or Bangladesh, the opportunity to study at a top-ranked university in Hong Kong is genuinely life-changing. These are real people making real decisions about their futures, and they deserve access to complete information about the environment they're entering, including the state of academic freedom, the political context, and the expectations that may come with accepting a scholarship funded by a state-backed program.
And fourth, watch the response from competing nations. If the United States and Europe want to maintain their influence in the developing world, they need to match this kind of investment in education. They need to make their own universities accessible and affordable to international students. Because right now, while Western nations are debating whether to restrict student visas, China is rolling out the red carpet. And in the competition for hearts and minds, showing up matters.
Now, let's synthesize everything we've covered today, because this story, while it might seem narrow, is actually a window into one of the most important dynamics of our time. We are watching the real-time construction of a new global order, and it's being built not with aircraft carriers and missiles, but with classrooms and dormitories and scholarship funds.
That's exactly right. The Belt and Road Initiative started with ports and railways. Then it expanded into telecommunications and digital infrastructure. Now it's reaching into universities and research institutions. This is a full-spectrum strategy for global influence, and education is perhaps its most potent element, because unlike a port or a railway, which can be nationalized or redirected, the relationships built through education live inside people. They travel across borders. They persist for lifetimes.
And Hong Kong is the tip of the spear in this strategy, precisely because of its unique position. It offers the credibility of a Western-style education system, the prestige of globally ranked institutions, the convenience of English-language instruction, and the direct connection to the Chinese economy and political system. It's the best of both worlds, at least on paper.
But the gap between paper and reality is where the real story lives. And that's why investigative journalism matters. Because the press release says Study in Hong Kong Week. The policy brief says Regional Education Hub. The minister says Growing Appeal. But the truth is more complex, more strategic, and more consequential than any of those phrases suggest.
And that complexity is exactly what we exist to unpack on this show. We don't do simple narratives. We don't do good guys and bad guys. We do systems analysis. We follow the money, the policy, and the power, wherever they lead.
And tonight, they led us from a seemingly routine education story in the South China Morning Post to the heart of a geopolitical competition that will shape the world our children and grandchildren inherit. That's not hyperbole. That's the reality of soft power in the 21st century.
Before we go, I want to acknowledge something. Covering stories involving China is complicated. There are legitimate critiques of Beijing's policies and legitimate concerns about its global ambitions. There are also racist and xenophobic narratives that weaponize those concerns for bigoted purposes. We reject those narratives entirely. Our criticism tonight is directed at state strategy and policy, not at Chinese people, Chinese culture, or Chinese students, who are as much participants in this system as anyone else.
That distinction matters, and will always make it on this show. You can scrutinize a government's strategic use of education without demonizing the students or the educators involved. In fact, doing so is essential to honest journalism. The students flocking to Hong Kong, whether from mainland China, Vietnam, Indonesia, or anywhere else, are pursuing opportunity. Our job is to examine the systems that create and shape those opportunities.
Well said, Maya. So to our viewers, keep asking questions. Keep reading beyond the headlines. And remember, the most important stories of our time are often hiding in plain sight, disguised as policy announcements and university brochures.
If you found tonight's report valuable, share it. Talk about it. Because this story won't get the coverage it deserves from outlets chasing clicks and controversy. It's too slow, too structural, too important for the daily news cycle. But it matters, and you deserve to understand it.
That's our show for tonight. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity.
Stay skeptical. Stay informed. And most importantly, stay engaged. Because democracy doesn't die in darkness. It dies in indifference. We'll see you next time on Truth Report. Good night.
Good night, everyone. And remember, the truth doesn't take sides, but it does demand your attention.